welcome back to another episode of the Format Podcast. So, you know what this is. This is a reaction to Notre Dame, Ohio State. A few days late, a lot of things going on, but definitely wanted to get that in and also have some time to process what I saw and what I thought about it. Not going to go too in-depth into the X's and O's, but just going to talk about the general feeling I get regarding Marcus Freeman, regarding where the program is in terms of competition against elite teams, etc. So before I get into that, you know what we got to do. Let's go ahead and click that subscribe, like, and notification bell. You see it right there. So you can be notified when new episodes come out and so you can join the team. All right. Also, if you want the audio only version of the podcast, pretty much anywhere you get your audio podcast, we are available. Make sure you just type in the Format Podcast and take a look. We should come up. Please go ahead, leave us a comment, whether it's on your audio podcast platform or whether it's on YouTube. All that stuff helps us to rise in the algorithm, helps us find more sports fans, helps more sports fans find us. We definitely want to do that. Finally, if you can, please give us a 5-star review. Again, all that stuff helps. And if you enjoy the pod, don't hesitate, share it with others so we can keep expanding this thing and I can keep bringing it to you. All right. So last week was week 1 officially of the college football season, and Notre Dame had a huge opener with tons of juicy storylines against the Ohio State University at Ohio State, the Horseshoe. So we know what happened by now. Notre Dame lost that game 21-10. Gave a pretty solid accounting of themselves going up against what most people regard as what's going to be one of the most, if not the most, explosive scoring offense in the country. I think it was the number 1 scoring offense in the country last year. Definitely was number 1 scoring offense in the Big Ten. Tons of weapons everywhere. Heisman candidates at quarterback C.J. Stroud, wide receiver Jackson Smith and Jigba, just still, as always, loaded in that wide receiver room. So there was a lot of concern about how Notre Dame defensively was going to be able to contain that. Of course, Notre Dame's brand new head coach, Marcus Freeman, is Ohio State alum. So there's that connection. You've got a brand new starting quarterback at Notre Dame in Tyler Buckner. He was highly recruited, but hadn't really played meaningful football, especially as a starter, in about 2 years. Had an ACL injury in high school, also missed a year with the pandemic, coming from California. So a lot of stuff to really take into account. You know, we spent all summer breaking it down, trying to figure out what the Irish could do in terms of being able to contain Ohio State skill players, being able to keep the score manageable, being able to shorten the game and have an opportunity to win. And what did we see? Notre Dame did what they have been doing more of late, and that is the defense showing up, playing well, playing physical. Notre Dame attempting to shorten the game and limit the opposing possessions with a strong running game. O-line U is kind of the moniker. Notre Dame has consistently had outstanding offensive line play, has sent a lot of guys to the NFL on that front, but at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, again, they weren't good enough. Now, a lot of people thought that Notre Dame was going to go into Ohio Stadium, get the doors blown off of them. But that didn't happen. Notre Dame really did a very good job of defensively controlling the game almost into the fourth quarter. In the third quarter, they still had a lead. But at the end of the day, if you can't score the football and keep up with a team like this, you're not going to be able to win. So there's a couple of things at play here. My good friend John Kennedy, host of the Always Irish Notre Dame football podcast. Check it out if you haven't. He's been on this pod a few times. One of the things that he likes to rant about is Notre Dame, as I mentioned, has the moniker of O-line U, but against the good teams, they're not able to effectively run the football. Now, in my estimation, I talked to him about this. In my estimation, that's not a function of the O-line not being good enough or the running game not being good enough. It's actually a function of the passing game not being good enough. Now, we all know that Notre Dame is lacking in the elite weapons on the outside, which you need to be successful and win championships in modern college football. You look at Ohio State, you look at Alabama, you look at even to some extent Georgia. Those best teams really have elite passing games and elite quarterback play. Now, we don't know yet whether or not Tyler Buckner is going to end up being elite at quarterback play. But we do know that he needs more weapons. And Marcus Freeman and Tommy Rees are doing a great job on the recruiting trail and trying to bring those in. But still, at this moment, for the most part, you don't really have it. So what happens in these big games, and Notre Dame hasn't had it overall for years. Maybe they have one guy, but when you have one guy who may be an elite weapon, the opposing defense can go ahead and bracket that and try to take that away from you. And at this point, Notre Dame's best pass catching threat is going to be tight end Michael Mayer, who obviously is 1 or 1A in the country as best tight end, and probably right there. He's on the Biletnikoff watch list. He's on the Mackey Award watch list for best tight end and best receiver in the country. So a tight end, as good as he is, if you don't have those other weapons on the outside, is not, for the most part, going to be a difference maker in big games against elite teams with elite talent. It's just not going to work. So back to the O-line U thing. What ends up happening here is, it's not that Notre Dame can't run the football effectively. It's not Notre Dame doesn't have elite O-line play and very good, if not elite O-line coaching. The problem is when the opponent on an elite team who generally has elite defensive players knows that you can't effectively throw the football because the talent is not there on the outside. What do? They can put 8 in the box and take that run game away from you. And Ohio State came into this game knowing that last year they got gassed in the run game. They got gassed in the run game by Oregon. They got gassed in the run game by Michigan. Utah was able to run the ball effectively against them. So the knock was on their toughness and their run defense. And what did? They knew Notre Dame lacking the explosive plays and players on the outside in the passing game, as well as knowing Notre Dame had a quarterback making his first start in such a raucous environment. What did? They went ahead and basically stacked the box and took Notre Dame's running game away, which was a huge part of what the Irish wanted to do in terms of shortening the game and taking possessions away from that explosive Ohio State offense. So the Buckeyes were extremely successful in that. And what that ended up doing was basically shutting down the Notre Dame offense, who, aside from a few big throws by Buckner, a 54-yarder to open the game, and then there was a 34-yarder, something like that. And, so there were a couple big throws in the game for the Irish, but overall couldn't get the passing game going. And that led to the running game stalling out. And as well as the defense played, and I got to say this, I was really impressed by the Notre Dame secondary and what they were able to do in this game, because we fully expected Ohio State and their firework receiving corps to be explosive as they always are, but they weren't. Jackson Smith and Jigba got knocked out the game early. And then even though we saw the Ohio State passing game make some plays, they weren't able to throw it all around the yard as we've often seen teams do against Notre Dame in these big games, right? So that bodes well, I think, in terms of the Notre Dame secondary as well as the Notre Dame defensive game plan. I definitely was impressed by that. I liked what I saw, but let's get down to it. At the end of the day, we've seen Notre Dame's defense play well against these teams before. The offense can't keep up, and then these teams pull away late. That's what we continue to see, and that's what we saw in this game. And Notre Dame's defense acquitted itself again extremely well, but towards the end of the game, Ohio State was able to really establish the running game, be physical, and wear out a Notre Dame defense that had been on the field for a while, played strong, but just couldn't hang in there long enough. The body blows started adding up, and then the dam broke, for lack of a better term. The Buckeyes had, I want to say, like a 14-play, 90-something yard drive in the fourth quarter that really put this thing away, and that to me speaks to fatigue and the defense just not getting enough help from the offense in this game. And if you're a Notre Dame fan, and we all know that I am, the problem here is not can Notre Dame compete with these teams, because they can, and we're starting to see that. And I was really under the impression that after the big 2020 win against Clemson, where DJ Uiagalelei comes into Notre Dame Stadium, sets the opposing quarterback passing record all time against Notre Dame. Notre Dame beats them in the double overtime thriller. That maybe the Irish had turned a corner in terms of being able to win these games, but no, not yet. And if you're a Notre Dame fan, it's just frustrating because you're saying Notre Dame is no longer at a point where winning these games, where playing close and not getting blown out is enough. If you want to consider yourself one of these elite teams and consider yourself in a position to truly go and compete for a national championship. Now, with that said, Notre Dame has been to the college football playoff twice now, and both times they have not played particularly well, but they have been to the college football playoff twice, and that's more than a lot of teams could say. But if you truly want to consider yourself on a level to compete for national championships, then you have to be able to win some of these games. That's all there is to it. Notre Dame is not in a place where moral victories are worth anything. It's not, they played well and they didn't get blown out. So no. Notre Dame is not there. Tell him, Herm.
Hello? You play to win the game.
Yeah, Notre Dame they're not in that place. And so they've got to find a way to start winning these games. Marcus Freeman, you definitely see, and his staff is really beating the recruiting trail, and they honestly have Notre Dame recruiting in a place where I never thought it could be, towards the very top of the country. And I did not expect that. But they are doing it. They've breathed new life into it. They've breathed new energy into it. And we will see down the road if those elite athletes and those elite players are going to change the tenor, because with the players and the athletes that Notre Dame has, they've almost hit a ceiling, right? They've 10 wins 5 years in a row, which a lot of programs can't say that, but to be able to break through and get to that next level, you just got to have the studs. You got to have the horses, and right now they don't. But that's a different story for a different day. At the end of the day here, Notre Dame goes down in week 1 to Ohio State, 21-10. Again, played well. Defense played really well, but not good enough. So there you have it. Those are my quick thoughts on week 1, the opener, Notre Dame versus Ohio State. So I'm out. Peace.